And so we bottle it up, bottle it up, bottle it up, and then it explodes out of us. This is a time where people are going to be misdirecting their anger, taking inappropriate action, starting a bunch of stuff all at once when really they should be starting nothing at all. Hi everyone, Heather here with astrologywithheather.com, and I'm back with another super exciting, very extended forecast. This one is for October 30th of 2022 all the way through to January 12th of 2023, the entire period of the Mars retrograde in the sign of Gemini. And oh my goodness, you guys, this is a huge energy, massive, explosive even. This is a time where people are going to be misdirecting their anger, taking inappropriate action, starting a bunch of stuff all at once when really they should be starting nothing at all. Mars retrograde is not the time to initiate, it's the time to reinitiate or relaunch or redo an action that has already been set in motion. However, this energy is going to have us feeling very amped up, very anxious, very pressured, and very impulsive as a result of that. So a lot of people are going to be misfiring. A lot of people are going to be launching into too many different directions at once because Mars is of course in the sign of Gemini, which has many, many different interests, and it can be very difficult to know which action to take under this influence. And with Mars in retrograde, people that are normally prone to hesitating to take action are going to do the exact opposite. They're going to take action very like on the fly, all at once, all of the sudden. They're going to take action on too many things, and it's going to cause a little bit of chaos, a little bit of a mess, because with Mars especially stationing in retrograde in a conjunction with Neptune, we're going to be very confused about the direction that we need to take, and the actions that we take, especially new actions, are going to be born out of that confusion. It's going to cause some interesting miscommunications also, I should say. Even though it's not a Mercury retrograde, Gemini is all about communication. It's an air sign. It's about community and collaboration and interaction, and also it's about information. And so I think we're going to have a lot of information shot at us from all different directions all at once over the next few months, where it's like overload, overkill. I don't know who to believe, or what piece of information to actually take action on, because it's sort of all over the place. It's very nebulous, it's very murky, and it's very chaotic. And so it's not going to be the best time for, again, launching into something new or taking very direct action on something for the very first time, because there's a lot of confusion. There's a lack of clarity that's happening, especially during certain points that we'll talk about when we get into the timeline more specifically for this Mars retrograde energy. But it's not great for that. It's also not great for anger and appropriate expression of anger. And so this is where, you know, when Mars is in retrograde, we can bottle up our anger, we can bottle up intense emotions, and we don't express them at the right time. And so we bottle it up, bottle it up, bottle it up, and then it explodes out of us at the most inappropriate, misdirected moment that it could possibly explode out of us, especially with that Gemini energy there. And so this is a time to reflect and respond rather than react. We're going to be feeling very reactionary to the information that's coming at us on a personal level in our own personal interactions, but also on a global societal level. I feel like the media is going to be absolutely chaos. I mean, we would already assume that based on the trajectory of events that are already scheduled to unfold during this time, but I think it's going to be way more than what we bargained for, and way more information overload and just all sorts of lies and weirdness and just strange stuff going on in the media, because Gemini very much rules that area. that sphere. And so people are going to be very reactionary to what they're hearing, and they're going to kind of jump the gun and make decisions and take action based on this misinformation that's going to be thrown around all over the place. People are going to kind of have knee-jerk reactions to what they're hearing is basically what's going on. And that can happen on a personal level too. So in your personal life, you might have somebody say something or do something, and it might trigger a reaction based on something from the past, or you might bottle it up, and then instead of, responding to it when the timing is right and the timing is appropriate, you might react to something else as a result of that bottled up anger. So kind of like you had an argument with your spouse, and instead of actually speaking your piece and working it out and taking the time to respond, you just stew in it. And then, somebody outside of your home, like your neighbor, says something or does something that is maybe minor in terms of an irritation, and you just explode. That's the type of energy that this Mars retrograde is and what it brings. It's what it brings on a personal level for people who have that in their chart. I know because I have Mars retrograde in my chart. There's this energy of wanting to bottle up your anger, and then, it comes out in the weirdest of times. And so you don't want that to happen. And so that's kind of what the Mars retrograde is not good for. What it is good for, though, is reinitiating, relaunching, restarting something that has maybe fizzled out or fallen by the wayside. That's where the Mars retrogrades are really powerful and really positive. This is also a time where Mars is going to be retrograding back and forth over a trine with Saturn. Saturn has been a problematic energy in the sign of Aquarius. Although Aquarius is its home sign, it's been in square with Uranus and in square with the eclipses. And the eclipse season is going to be going on all throughout this Mars retrograde period. And so during this time, we're going to have the eclipse energy, which is going to be super, super intense, super, super life-changing, super turbulent this time around with this square to Saturn that's going to be in the mix there. But Mars is providing an outlet. It's providing a way to take action to almost mitigate the chaotic, life-changing events that might be feeling really disruptive. It doesn't mean they're going to be negative. It doesn't mean that the end results are going to be negative, but it's going to feel very disruptive. And there is going to be some friction there. And so this Mars energy actually provides an outlet where it's kind of like, you know what? In the past, this is what worked for me. I'm going to redo that action. I'm going to redo this thing. I'm going to relaunch this thing. Or I started this thing a while ago, and now that this disruption has taken place, it feels like the perfect opportune moment for me to actually go for it and relaunch it. That's what this Mars retrograde energy is really, really good for. It provides a mitigating influence for Saturn where we can redo something or re-enter into something and stick it out for the long haul and actually see it through to fruition. And so I love that about the Mars retrograde. And also, if you are a natal Mars retrograde person, you might not be subject to these same rules and these same influences. You might actually be better with your timing for initiating action. Although initiating new action is not necessarily ideal regardless, but you might be able to restart something that you just misfired and mistimed, and all of a sudden it just takes off and it goes wild and it's so successful. That's a really good thing to do with this energy, especially for Mars retrograde people. If you were born under a Mars retrograde, you might be able to express your anger way more appropriately and use it to fuel something in you, to get things going, to make things happen. So I love that. And then kind of the other thing I should mention, because Mars in astrology rules arguments and disputes, it rules battles. It also represents the separating principle. While Venus brings things together in a harmonious way, Mars separates. And so this is a time where there could be, first off, arguments and disputes that are miscalculated. Whoever initiates an argument, whoever initiates a battle is going to lose under this influence. And so keep that in mind, even if you are a Mars retrograde person. Let them start the fight. Let them, initiate the battle, and, you'll be on the winning side of it. If that is the case, you just take a step back and say, I'm going to wait. And if this is still a problem in January, then I'll initiate. But the other thing to kind of make note of is separations under this influence don't usually last. And so if you're trying to end something definitively, if you're trying to separate yourself from something once and for all, this is a time where it's not going to stick and you're going to have to wait. And waiting and, taking your time and actually ending it. So if you have to dissolve a boundary, or you have to end a contract, or you're trying to, separate yourself from a job or from a business or from a person, if it's showing up in your chart in that way, or even if you're trying to separate yourself from a debt or something like that, it's not going to stick. Something's going to come back. So it could be that you pay off the debt and then all of a sudden, Mars goes direct and you still have all these fees that you didn't know about. And so it's not actually fully paid or something like that. So all things to make note of. Mars retrograde rules across the board, especially with Gemini. We do have a lot of really confusing all over the place energy because of that Neptune influence, not necessarily because it's Gemini, but it's very mutable. It's very changeable. Whatever we think in terms of the direction that we're moving into with whatever we initiate during this period, that's not what's going to happen. So that's a big part of it. So I'm going to get into the general timeline for the Mars retrograde before we get into the forecast for all 12 signs. I do want to mention for this video in particular, first off, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're new to my channel, because I do a new forecast or tutorial video every single Saturday at 9 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, and you don't want to miss that, especially if you're someone who's interested in learning astrology, because teaching astrology is my specialty. But on that kind of same vein, for this video, make sure, if you haven't already done so, that you download my free Astrology 101 PDF guide. You're going to want to do this because you're going to want to note certain things in your chart in order to enhance this reading, because it's so important that you understand what's going on here more holistically, in addition to just looking at the all signs forecast. And so for this video, note in your chart your natal Mars position. So which house is it in? Which sign is it in? Which houses does it rule? So which houses in your chart are occupied by Aries or by Scorpio in whole sign houses? And then check in the Astrology 101 PDF guide the topics that are associated with those houses. So for example, if you are an Aries rising, then Mars is the ruler of your chart, which is so important. And it's also the ruler of your 8th house. So it's going to be tied to topics involving your body and your physical health, but also your willpower and your really your personal goals, ambitions, your direction in life, major life themes. It's really representing you, but it's also representing debts, joint finances, taxes, inheritance, really deep psychological issues. There's a lot that goes into it. So you're going to want to note those two things. You're also going to want to note which house Mars is in your chart and what those significations are, because all three of these areas are going to be impacted by the Mars retrograde. After that, you're going to want to look at if you have planets in the mutable signs, which are Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, and Pisces, because those planets and the significations of those planets that you'll find in the PDF guide are going to be subject to challenge, and you're going to have to revisit those challenges multiple times during the Mars retrograde. You're also going to want to note if you have any planets placed in air signs. The air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. The air signs, with the exception of Gemini, that might be a mixed bag of energy because it's mutable and it's air and it's where the Mars retrograde is happening. But the other two air signs, which are Libra and Aquarius, the planets that are in those signs are going to be subject to positive enhancement, a lot of willpower, a lot of restarting and reinitiating things in association with the significations of those planets, which are laid out in the PDF guide. And so that's where you're going to get a lot of motivation, and you're going to have an opportunity for a restart in some way. And so all of those things you're going to want to make note of before we get into the forecast for all 12 signs, which is why I always want you guys to listen to the general overview, because I can't really cover all of this in every single sign. It would be like a 6-hour video. So All right, so we did that. So let's get into the general timeline and then we'll get into the extended forecast. So Mars is going to be in Gemini and has been in Gemini since August 20th of this year of 2022, if you're watching this next year. And it's going to stay in Gemini until March 30th of 2023. This means Gemini people and mutable people are going to be hit really intensely by this Mars energy, which is why I wanted you to look at that. And it's going to last for many, many months, and it already has been started. So the pre-shadow for the Mars retrograde actually began on September 6th. So things that were initiated from September 6th all the way through to October 29th are going to be redone, restarted, reinvigorated. You're going to have to kind of rehash something about it during the Mars retrograde. It doesn't mean it won't work out because you didn't initiate it during the Mars retrograde, so it should be okay. But there's something where you're going to have to reinvent it or redo it or relaunch it in some way during that period, and that would be okay. And it's probably going to be necessary. The Mars retrograde itself lasts from October 30th through January 12th of 2023. And so that's when the Mars retrograde stuff that we just talked about is going to be really at play. And then from January 12th until March 15th of 2023, that is the Mars retrograde post shadow. That's where a lot of the things that you initiated during the Mars retrograde will unravel, where they'll fizzle out, where they're not going to come to fruition in the same way that you felt like they did when the energy was behind it during the Mars retrograde. That energy is going to be taken away. And so that's why you don't want to initiate anything that's like so important. Because there's a likelihood or an increased likelihood that it will fizzle out, especially if it's under the rule of Mars. So if it's something, again, like a legal battle or something like that, or if it involves like machinery or, other martial types of things, like an exercise program using your muscles, like all of those things are going to fizzle out more so than other types of topics and other types of activities. But that's actually where we get to start initiating and launching new things. It's kind of like we relaunched all this other stuff. We got our ducks in a row, and now we're jumping into new things at the new year from the 12th through the 15th. The big players, the big things that are happening during the Mars retrograde are the Mars retrograde square to Neptune that happened on October 12th. It's going to station on October 30th in square with Neptune. And then it's going to make that final like full-on square to Neptune on March 14th, which is going to be the very end of the post-shadow period. The other big thing that's happening is Mars retrograde and trine to Saturn, which we already talked about. The dates for that are going to be it happened first on September 27th. Something will be revisited on November 28th from that time period that you launched into and initiated. And this is going to be revisited so it will last and so it'll stand the test of time. Whereas the Mars square Neptune stuff that happened around October 12th will be revisited because something got confused on November 19th. And it's kind of like, oh, out of confusion, I did this. Now I have to go back and redo it. The Mars trine Saturn's a little bit different, where it's kind of like, I launched into this, now I have to refine it and launch this other thing or do something a little differently in order to make sure it lasts and it stays stable. And that's going to be, again, on November 28th. And then finally, the final pass of it's going to be on March 30th, which is outside of that post-shadow. And it's actually going to be out of sign. So we're going to have both Mars and Saturn moving on into Cancer, into Pisces at that time. So it'll be a different energy, and we'll get to that in depth in March. The final big energy is the Sun opposition to Mars at 16 degrees in the sign of Gemini on December 7th. That's always a big culmination point of the Mars retrograde, where something really big is revealed. And there could even be like an opposition to your plans that comes up around that time that could really, it could really take hold, and all of a sudden something shifts. So we'll talk about that. So let's get into the forecast for all 12 signs, beginning, of course, with Aries and Aries rising, because it is your ruling planet. And so this is going to impact you really intensely. So for Aries and for Aries rising, Mars is going to be retrograding in your third house, which is the house of neighbors, short distance travel, communication, education, and also your siblings and extended family members. And so these are all areas where you're not going to want to initiate something brand new during this time. What you're going to want to do is revisit old projects, old plans, old things that you have initiated in the past that are related to those topics and themes. And so it could be that maybe you're not embarking on a brand new journey to a new place that you've never been before, but you're revisiting and doing like a day trip to a place where you've already been to in the past, and that's part of this Mars retrograde energy. Maybe you're revisiting old arguments, fights, and disputes with extended family, or with your neighbors, or with people in your neighborhood, in your immediate environment. And if that's the case, that's okay. Just don't start a new dispute. Don't start a new fight. Don't start a new battle with your neighbors during this time, because you're sure to lose. Although if they start the battle, or if your siblings pick the fight, they're going to be on the losing side of the argument. And so those are all things to keep in mind. There's going to be confusion about what action to take when it comes to the direction of potentially an educational pursuit, or maybe a writing or a teaching pursuit of some kind, where it's kind of confusing like what you want to do or what you should launch into. I would say during the Mars retrograde in particular, this isn't a time to embark on a new educational pursuit. This is a time to revisit something you've already learned about in the past, or something you've already taught in the past, and to do it again with way more gusto, way more energy, way more passion, and to actually see it through so it doesn't fizzle out this time around. This is also a really great time to reconnect in a very physical or in a very kind of overt way with friends and people in your life that maybe those connections, those relationships, that community has fizzled out in some way. And that could actually be really fruitful for you throughout this time period. So that's what's going on for Aries. Okay. And so for Taurus and for Taurus rising. So for Taurus, Mars is retrograding in your second house, which is the house of primarily finances and your property, the things that you own. So this is not a really great time for initiating something new and really important when it comes to your finances. This is a good time to revisit and reevaluate and redo things that you've launched in the past financially that, maybe didn't work out so well. Maybe it fizzled out. Maybe it never came truly to fruition. Maybe you started to create a budget and then you kind of fell off the wagon, and now's the time to recommit yourself to that. Maybe there's something that, like a financial goal you were working toward in the past, and you need to recommit yourself to it, or a big purchase that you started to make but then you backed out and now you have to redo it. There's something along those lines that could happen. It could also be redoing something or relaunching something that is intended to create financial gain long term through your career path and through your work. And that could be something that could be actually really good for you. It's not, like I mentioned before, a great time for starting something brand new financially. And it's not a good time to get mixed up with money and friends. That's going to cause like a lot of damage in terms of your relationships. So you want to not lend money to your friends right now. Don't launch into like something new, like invest in something that your friends want you to invest in, join their MLM or something like that. Not a great time for that. But yeah, it is a good time for revisiting old opportunities or reinitiating old opportunities financially and in terms of your career as well. Okay, and then for Gemini and for Gemini rising. So for Gemini, Mars is in your sign. You might be feeling a little heated. This is a time where Geminis are going to be way more reactionary than normal. It's kind of like there's a lot of different information flying at you. There's a lot of irritating stuff going on in your life, in your environment that's directed at you personally, and you yourself are going to feel hot. It's kind of like, I don't know where to direct all this energy. And you're going to be potentially making some strange decisions, especially when it comes to your career or the way that you show up out in the public sphere. And so you don't want to launch into anything fully and completely during this time, especially when it comes to your career path, especially when it comes to something that's going to be viewed or consumed publicly. So you want to take that into account because you're very likely to misfire or take a wrong turn, and whatever it is that you're initiating is very likely to fizzle out or to backfire or to lead to some sort of separation or ending. What this is really good for is relaunching something, redoing something, recommitting yourself maybe to an old exercise or nutrition program in the first house. This would be a great time if you were somebody who used to maybe do weightlifting, or you used to do boxing, or you used to do whatever, and it's fizzled out. This is a great time to recommit yourself to your health through that exercise routine. This is a good time to recommit yourself to anything that you are passionate about that you used to do, that is part of your direction, part of your path in life, that again, it's fallen by the wayside. You lost motivation, you lost momentum. The momentum will be there now. This is also a really great time to recommit yourself to some sort of educational pursuit for the long term that has been blocked, or there's been too much disruption to allow you to see it forward. Now is a great time that you can jump in, you can really do it, you can really recommit yourself. Okay, and then for Cancer and for Cancer rising. So for Cancer, this is happening in your 12th house. This is a lot of blocked anger and blocked resentment that's like really bottled up, and it's going to be eating at you subconsciously. It's kind of like you're feeling this subconscious, unsettled, really like intense energy. It could be manifesting through your dreams. I would say Cancers might be having recurring dreams or recurring nightmares, or just recurring disruptions to their sleep during this time, especially Cancer rising people. And pay attention to what comes up, because it's something that you're revisiting through that subconscious realm that needs to be released out into the open. This is going to be part of a healing process for you with Mars in trine to Saturn in your 8th house. This could be something really deep, really psychological, like a past trauma, a really deep-seated fear that you're finally going to be able to face. It could even be a fear surrounding death. That's what Saturn kind of brings in the 8th house. In a very literal sense, it could be stirring up a subconscious fear around death or dying, your own death or someone else's, and you could be working through that internally, subjectively, spiritually, and behind the scenes. This could also bring a need to revisit something behind the scenes involving 12th house institutions, like having to be rehospitalized or someone in your life being rehospitalized. Not saying that that's going to happen for most of you. This is just one example. Or having to redo some sort of rehabilitation program, or having to go back and revisit something involving maybe a spiritual path or a spiritual retreat or a pilgrimage of some kind. All of these things are likely right now. This is really not a good time for Cancers and Cancer rising people to initiate something brand new, because this is like digging into past life karma. This is like digging into things that are so subconscious, and your willpower is going to be stifled and hidden more so. This is like a hidden energy of the will where it's going on behind the scenes, but it's not necessarily the time to initiate or take action. And that's okay. This is where almost like your energy is depleted because you need to take some time to rest, because you need to take some time for healing. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're sick or something like that physically or even psychologically. It just means that there's something within you that needs to heal, and this is the time for it. Okay, and then for Leo and for Leo rising. So for Leo, this Mars retrograde is happening in your 11th house, which is the house of friends, group associations, networks, and people that you surround yourself with by choice. It's your social sphere. It's your social reality. And so this is actually not the worst energy for Leo. This would be a great time for reinitiating connections to groups of people, friendships, group associations, or even reigniting your commitment and your passion in one-on-one relationships, including romantic partnerships, because of that trine to Saturn. If that's been stifled, if you've been having trouble in that area, if it's been disrupted in some way because of the Saturn-Uranus square and all of the eclipse energy, now's the time where you can recommit yourself to your relationship, form a friendship with your partner, and a committed, long-term, loving, affectionate relationship. Now's the time where that is absolutely a possibility. What this is not the time for is initiating a new kind of social program or a new group. It's not a good time to launch a new club or become in the 11th house with Mars, becoming the leader of a group or something like that. That can backfire. That could cause issues, especially financial issues if you're mixing up with money with that group or that organization or that charity. It's not the best time to do that fresh. But if you're restarting it, You used to be a part of this membership. You used to be a part of this collective. You used to go to this like social gathering thing. And now you're recommitting yourself, or you're redoing it, or you're going back into it after it fizzled out. This is a great time for that. Not a good time to mix money and friendship. Don't loan money. Don't borrow money from friends. Other than that, though, this is actually a great time socially, I would say. But again, it's a revisiting, like new friendships that are initiated and new relationships. They're not going to be very likely to stick. And if you're trying to end a friendship or end a connection, that's not going to stick either. So that's what's going on for Leo. For Virgo and for Virgo rising. So for Virgo, Mars is retrograding in your 10th house, which is the house of career and public reputation. This is a time to relaunch something. Like if you have had some sort of fizzling out when it comes to an important career path, an important career project, an important position, maybe you were up for a promotion and you didn't get it, or you were up for a job offer, like you interviewed for a position and you didn't get it, reapply, recommit yourself to doing the work and putting yourself out there so that way you can achieve the highest potential in your career, because that's what this energy is going to bring for you. It's going to help you to be very determined. It's going to help you to be very hardworking. It's going to help you to be very disciplined and focused on whatever your career goals and plans are, especially career goals and plans that didn't work out in the past, but you feel so intensely that you need to commit yourself to them. That's what this is for. This is not the best time to enter into, though, contracts, agreements, business partnerships, things like that related to career or business. That's where things are going to get dicey, especially if it's brand new. Like renewing a contract, that might be okay, although definitely read the fine print, definitely take your time with it. But starting a new agreement, like if you were entering into a business partnership during this time and you are a Virgo rising, it's likely to end in separation. It's likely to fizzle out. The project isn't likely to go forward as planned in the same way that it normally would be. So although this is great for revisiting business endeavors and recommitting yourself to things that have already fizzled out and they can come back around, this is not the time to start something new. Okay. So for Libra and for Libra rising. So for Libra, this is happening in your 9th house. And I mentioned, for Libras and for Aquarius, this is a better energy. And that's definitely the case for you, Libra. So this is a great time for you in general. You're going to feel much more passionate, much more motivated, much more lit up about life, much more adventurous. This is revisiting old opportunities to connect with people in foreign countries, to connect with other cultures, to connect with travel pursuits and plans, to connect with educational pursuits or teaching pursuits or writing or publishing pursuits. If these are things that you have tried in the past and they have fizzled out, but you still have it in the back of your head, like it's eating at you, like, gosh, I launched this thing, I launched this course maybe 2 years ago and it didn't work out, and I have this nagging feeling I still need to do it. Now would be the time to launch in. Or I tried to go back to school, it didn't work out, and it's just this nagging feeling that I need to just do it. Like now's the time to do it. What this isn't going to be the best for is potentially, I would say there could be some confusion around launching into especially new ideological pursuits or new philosophical types of belief systems. So studying things that are kind of big picture, that pertain to your worldview. Like there's something going on here that's going to change or disrupt your worldview during this time, where you think you know it all and you think that this is the thing, and it's just not going to be the thing. And that paradigm is going to be shattered probably come January or February of next year. So, don't believe everything you hear. Don't think that you know the answers or that you understand the big picture about just general things going on in the world, or, just in terms of your life and the direction that it's headed just yet, because that is going to be subject to change. For Scorpio and for Scorpio rising. So for Scorpio, Mars is actually in your 8th house, which is the house of debt, joint finances, taxes, inheritance. It's also the house of death. It's the house of fear, anxiety, deep-seated traumas, deep-seated issues. It's the house of the occult. This is a time where there could be a need to revisit something or recommit to yourself to something involving like a tax strategy or your taxes. You might have to repay a debt that you thought that you already got rid of or you thought that you already dealt with. You might have to recommit yourself to a financial plan or recommit yourself to a joint financial plan with your spouse. It could be that your spouse is launching into something financially and he thinks or she thinks it's going to be like the thing, and it fizzles out, it doesn't work out. So be careful about making investments, be careful about joint financial ventures, unless there are things that you've already started and you're recommitting to or reactivating in some way. This is also going to be a time of internal tension where you're going to have triggers and fears and anxieties that come up very suddenly, but they're coming up for long-lasting healing, especially if it's something ancestral, especially if it's something connected to your parents, your childhood, your early childhood experience, especially if it's like a fear around death or dying. That's an 8th house topic that comes on very suddenly, where you're like, actually, now that I'm revisiting this, now that I'm looking at this, I don't need to be afraid, like that type of thing. This is not the best time to spend a lot of money or invest a lot of money in your passions or your hobbies, especially if you're doing it for the very first time, because those passions or those hobbies or that investment is likely to fizzle out. But I mean, beyond that, I would just say don't start anything brand new involving investments, taxes, inheritance, insurance, things like that. You might have to revisit it or change it, or it probably just won't work out properly. Unless it's something that, again, you're revisiting. It's like you started it and then you didn't see it through, and now is the time where you have to see this financial venture all the way through to the end. For Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising. So for Sagittarius, this is happening in your 7th house, which is the house of relationships. This is a time where your sibling and extended family relationships could be revisited. You could reignite, connections in that area. But when it comes to relationships with your parents, your immediate family, this might be a little dicey. This could also be not a good time to enter into a new relationship, because that new relationship, the fire, the flame, the passion that you're feeling might fizzle out very quickly after Mars goes direct. And it's not also the time to break up with someone if you want the relationship to be ended once and for all. The same goes for ending a contract. So if you want to sever a contract or an agreement, or if you want to end some sort of business venture or something along those lines, this is not the time for that. What this is the time for is renegotiating old contracts, especially if you're not the one initiating actually, you probably could renegotiate. So initiating a renegotiation would be okay. But this is a time where, especially if you're maybe on the receiving end of that, it could go in your favor. Or if somebody else initiates, because this is the house of enemies too. If somebody in your life initiates a battle or an argument or a dispute or even a legal battle, it's likely that they are going to lose. Same thing goes for you though. So this is a time where you might be feeling fired up and heated in one-on-one situations. You might want to battle it out. You might want to fight. You might want to have the conflict. And you might feel really intense, like you have to initiate this conflict. You have to fix this right now. I would say don't. If you initiate, you're probably going to lose. It's not going to go the way that you want it to, especially in battles or arguments involving the home, family, real estate, property, things like that. There's a lot of confusion. You're not seeing it clearly, and you're going to take action in the wrong way. So that's the good and bad of this. It's great for communication. It's great for reigniting your passions in your current relationship. This is excellent for that. It's great for like just feeling excited again about a connection, about a friendship, about something that you've committed yourself or contracted yourself to in the past that maybe has fallen by the wayside and fizzled out, but not the best for new things. For Capricorn and for Capricorn rising, this Mars retrograde is happening in your 6th house, which is the house of health, work, and daily routines. This is maybe not the best time to start a new health routine because it probably isn't going to last or isn't going to stick. But this is a really great time to revisit old nutritional routines, old diets, old ways of healing your body that you've tried in the past, but maybe you didn't keep the motivation up to stick to it, because right now the motivation will be there and you'll actually be able to see it through if you're restarting these things. But if you're starting it from scratch, if you're starting a brand new nutritional program or a brand new exercise routine, it's not likely to last. On the same token, if you have some kind of issue, like an illness or something like that you've been working on healing and you haven't been able to quite get there, you can revisit that healing process in some way and you can actually see some progress. You can see a shift in your physical well-being, your physical health from that. But if there is kind of an issue that comes up during this time health-wise, if it comes up before the Mars retrograde, there could be a revisiting or a relapse. And if it comes up during the Mars retrograde, there could be a revisiting or a relapse. So just kind of keep that in mind too. But this is not the time to start some brand new health regimen unless you absolutely have to. Just again, because it's something that you're not going to feel motivated to stick with. So try something that you've done in the past that has already worked for you that maybe you didn't stick with last time. This is also a really great time to revisit projects and employment goals and things like that have maybe fizzled out or you didn't stick with. And, now in terms of your work, now is a time where you're able to revisit it, to reignite your passion for it, and to stick with it for the long haul. I would say that this is a great time for you to revisit projects that could have some sort of long-term financial gain with your work, with your business, with your career. Or if you're somebody who maybe owns a business, think about rehiring an old employee or revisiting someone maybe who you rejected for a job instead of hiring brand new if you feel like you need to hire someone at this time. And even if you're not somebody who owns a business, if you're thinking about hiring someone to even do like an odd job around your house, if you're hiring someone brand new, their work is not going to be satisfactory, or if it's not going to stick, you're going to have it redone or something like that. So what you want to do is rehire someone who you've worked with in the past. So let's say that your plumbing is leaking, or you need to get something done in your house and you need a contractor. Instead of seeking out a new contractor, find someone you already worked with, even if it didn't work out perfectly, because this time around, I think it's going to work out better for you in that way. And that's going to be a better financial decision because you're not going to be redoing it and having to pay for it twice. This could also indicate a lot of anger due to miscommunications in the workplace. So when somebody says or does something that really pisses you off, take a breath, take a moment. You don't want to bottle it up, and you don't want to yell at people all willy-nilly at the inappropriate time because you're having a bad day, but you want to make sure that you're really thinking about the situation and seeing it very clearly and responding rather than reacting out of impulse. On the flip side, if you're normally very passive and you just let people walk all over you, this could be a time where impulse is good. So it depends on your nature and how you normally are versus what this is going to bring up for you. Because if you're somebody who does normally hold back and bottle up your anger already, this could be a time where it could come out and it's actually important. Or if you're a Mars retrograde person natally, you could just kind of bite your tongue in the workplace most of the time, but now it's a time for you to stand up for yourself and address things in the moment, and that could actually work out in your favor, but only again if you're a Mars retrograde person or you're somebody who's normally quite passive. Okay, and then for Aquarius and Aquarius rising. So for Aquarius, Mars is retrograding in your 5th house, which is a really nice time to reignite passions sexually in relationships, but also a really great time to reignite passions when it comes to hobbies, interests, things that you love to do. This would also be a good time to revisit some sort of entertainment venue or some sort of performance or some sort of thing that you've kind of done in the past that was really fun and really enjoyable for you, kind of like having a date night where you went to this place and you loved it and you never went back. Now's the time to go back and revisit that, and I think it'll be very fun and very kind of freeing for you. In terms of Mars retrograde in the 5th house, if you have children, this is a really great time to revisit something or redo something or reinitiate something with them. But it's not a good time to initiate something for the very first time involving your children, because it's likely to fizzle out and it's likely not to stick. This is a really great time for you to revisit your passions, though, and the things that you love, and make them a part of your day-to-day life and a part of your identity, a bigger part of your experience moving forward. That's where things can go really well for you. The one area though I would be cautious about is spending too much money on your passions. So spending too much money on the things that you love, because during this time that money might be wasted. It's not going to be well spent. It might not work out the way you think it will. And if it's a new hobby or something that you're feeling really fired up about in the moment that is not really linked to your past, then it could probably just fizzle out. Like, oh, I'm really interested in this. I'm super excited to take dance lessons. And then you spend all this money on it, and then Mars goes direct and you haven't, you've gone to one lesson, but you paid for a whole package, that kind of thing. All right. And then for Pisces and for Pisces rising. So for Pisces, this is a tougher one for Pisces, I would say. Mars is going to be retrograding in your 4th house, which is the house of home, family, property, and real estate. This could cause a lot of frustration and a lot of issues in the home, and maybe very literally with your place of living. A lot of confusion around Mars types of activities in the home, which could very literally be like using tools, doing a renovation, doing something very active with your home, or it could be taking action on moving to a new home or something like that. If that's the case, this is probably not the time to do it. If you're redoing an old renovation, if you're maybe redoing something that you've repaired in the past, or you're redoing something involving like a move, like maybe you move to one location and then you're moving back, this would be great for that. But otherwise, there's a sense of confusion around which direction to take when it comes to what you need to do involving your living space, what you need to do involving your family situation. There could be old arguments and disputes that are brought back up that could be resolved once and for all, but new disputes are probably not going to resolve very easily until Mars goes direct, and whoever brought up that dispute, whoever started the argument, is going to be on the losing side. And so while you might be feeling much more aggressive, I would say, even for a Pisces, much more aggressive and much more reactionary than normal across the board, but especially when it comes to dealing with your family, this is not the time to pick a fight. This is not the time to air your grievances directly. This is a time to sit back and let them speak their piece, or this is a time to make sure that you're sitting back and responding appropriately, responding calmly if you can, rather than reacting, rather than starting a fight, because you're not likely to win that battle. And legal battles involving property or the home, same thing. Like, you don't want to start that because it's just not gonna, it's probably not gonna work out as well for you. But this is a really great time for recommitting yourself to some sort of important action involving your family. This is a really great time for you to recommit yourself to your family in general, and your family life, your home life. This is a really great time for you to revisit old disputes and to finally resolve issues within your family, within your ancestral line even, that have been long held, that have been going on for like decades, for years, for generations even. This is the time when you can settle those disputes. This is a time where you can actually finally come to a resolution if you revisit it in some way. So that's what this energy is really good for. But there's going to be a lot of confusion around taking action, especially involving the home and just in general. So be careful about doing brand new things, Pisces, because it's just not clear. There's not a lot of clarity right now, and that's okay. This is a time to just focus on what you've already started. All right, and so that's what's going on for Pisces. And so that was my forecast for all 12 signs. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more about astrology and your own chart, make sure you check out this video over here and watch it next. And in the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it with your friends if you feel like they could benefit from the information that I share with you today, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.